We're 1 minute after, so that means that it's starting time. Uh, Andrew has been leading our IARF endeavor in bringing some of the manuscripts into English, and he told me this morning, 108 of Imaoka Sensei's essays. Uh, I guess two extra writings were counted in. That's great. He also has shifted now to Czech and Chopik's work and is working with a team uh, in Prague. And this work is fantastic uh, because it has both the power of AI, but also native speakers looking over the work. And then the detail is, how do you begin to express some of the liberating spirituality that is in these documents that is being lost? And that was the problem with the Imaoka material, that it was going to be lost forever. And that's one of the reasons why it is such a privilege to have him speaking tonight on one of the most important of the essays on free religion that Imaoka Sensei wrote. Andrew, the time is yours.
Thank you, George. I said it it's yesterday for me, it's this morning for George. But just a reminder that none of what I've been able to do would have been possible, of course, without George's really important work back in the 80s of doing so much research in Japan and liberal religion in Japan, but from my point of view, primarily in connection with meeting Imoaka Shin'ichirō, Imoaka Sensei. So thanks, George, as well. Couldn't have been done without you. But it also wouldn't have been done without all of you here, because as I think most of you now know, Imoaka Sensei's project was always free religion for him was this mix of a very individual form of liberal and free religion, but also a profoundly social version. You had to have both. So if you weren't here and interested, and we weren't interested in this free spirituality, this free religion, then none of this would happen. So we should, yeah, let's clap ourselves on the back for being engaged in the project. Thank you. What I did for the earlier session was read through the essay paragraph by paragraph. There are only 7 paragraphs, so it's not very long, and then speak immediately to them, bringing out a couple of important points. And that should leave us with about 20 minutes or so conversation to ask any questions. If you have any questions during my talk, just wave your hand or put up the yellow hand, and I'll happily break it. That will only change this plan if this is not a quiz. If you haven't done this, I'm expecting you not to have done this. If you've all read the essay that George sent, then I can talk to it, but I imagine not all of you have read it through, which is fine. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
Andrew, I'd say even if we've read it through, it would be good going through it again. There is so much in that essay.
All right, we'll do that then. Thank you for that that supportive comment. Much appreciated. Okay, but before I begin, I do want to remind you, I think everybody here knows in one way or another the 2 things I'm going to say first, but let's pop it up. Hopefully you can see my screen. Just before we get to the bit I want to talk about, I thought it's always good to have Imoaka Shinichiro's face in our mind. This is him in the 1930s. So already by then he's in his 40s or 50s at this point. So there he is as a younger man. This is him in 1965, after having received an Imperial Award for Education. Here is Michinori, of course, will instantly recognize President Niwano from Rishikoshi Kai there on the left and Imoaka on the right. So it's a nice photo of the two of them. Here's our man, George. There he is in 1981 with Imoaka Sensei. And here is Imoaka Sensei in his study when he was 104 years old. So amazing writing way. So the two things I simply want to speak to before beginning, remind you of these two. For the moment, you just need to worry about the top line and the bottom line. I might talk about the other two. But the top line, that's the Japanese text for Jiyu Shukyo, this free religion. It's a perfectly acceptable translation, free religion, but it's much better to keep in mind when I speak about free religion and when I read the word, imagine it with a hyphen, so it's one word, free religion, that you'd interpret it in your mind as something like a dynamic, creative, free, inquiring, and liberative religion or spirituality. It's a really big term. This Jiyu, this idea of freedom and liberation at the beginning, is really important. So Jiyu Shukyo is Imoaka Sensei's term for the religion or the teaching. Here we've got this character at the end, Shukyo, the Kyo. That was his basic teaching. And his church or community that he founded in 1948, post-war, was something called the Kiitsu Kyo Kai. There's that Kyo again, same as the one up the top. So the teaching in the Kiitsu Kyo Kai is Jiyu Shukyo. And Kiitsu means returning to one. It's a dynamic thing. It's not, I think it's much better in English to talk about returning to one than Unitarian, which can sometimes sound rather static. You know, that there is this thing called Unitarian or Unitarianism. So although Kiitsu was often translated as Unitarian, it's much more dynamic. It's a returning to one. It's a constant process of us trying to return to one as a community, as an individual. So it's got a dynamic quality. And the Kyokai, which is often translated as church, that's definitely what this first one, this one here I'm circling, was translated as, although it was used in Jodo Shinshu circles as a kind of small ancillary temple or teaching place. A Kyokai. This version of it here is Imoaka Sensei used this old character to indicate that his church or community or gathering was more than simply a Christian church. It was a place of study, learning, it was a school, it was a place of mutual refinement, where we taught one another without passing on doctrines. It was George and I were talking earlier, that it also has the sense of a study hall where one learnt about free religion. So it was a mixture of both a religious and spiritual place, plus a place of learning and mutual refinement. So you'll hear free religion, Jiyu Shukyo, a creative, inquiring, dynamic, free and liberative religion, and Kiitsu Kyokai, a returning to one gathering. So that's those two terms are really important to have in mind. Okay, here we go. Michi, I have, remember, I've got the Japanese, if there's a I'm going to just share an English text without the kanji. But if you hear a word that you want to know about in the Japanese, please ask, because I've got that text available. But for reading on screen, I'll just read a clean English text. Okay, here we come. Share. So, one paragraph at a time. Position of a free religious person, 1951. This text is quite early in the history of Kietsu Kyokai. 1951 is only 3 years after his post-war Kietsu Kyokai begins. So this is a piece, him trying to articulate what a free religious person is, some of the basics, and so it's right at the start of a long development. And it was published in Creation. Creation magazine was the in-house magazine of Kietsu Kyokai. Okay, here we go. Since religion is an individual experience, it is, as Shinran Shonin stated in absolute terms, extremely personal. Amida's salvation is for me alone, Amida Buddha. However, the more deeply one pursues the personal aspect, the more religion simultaneously becomes a social matter. It is not a matter of being saved first and then telling others, come to the place I've reached. Rather, the attitude of Hozo Bosatsu, this is the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, I'll come back to that, who said, until all sentient beings are saved, I too cannot be saved. I am saved together with all others, is just as correct as that of Shinran Shonin. Though these two perspectives may seem contradictory at first glance, they are in fact two sides of the same religious life. With the aim of freely expressing this religious life, the position of the free religious person is one that is, on one hand, deeply individualistic, and on the other, profoundly universal. However, if someone were to object, saying, isn't this the stance of all true religious people, not just free religionists, I would wholeheartedly agree. The position of the free religious person is nothing other than the position of a true religious person. The position of a true religious person, bound by nothing, is precisely the position of a free religious person. Thus, my answer is, free religion is in fact nothing other than religion itself. Okay. So, remember, Jiyu Shukyo is always this mix of the individual and the social. You cannot pull them apart. Later on in this short presentation, I'm going to point back to the principles of living, which we've already looked at in other sessions, which has this trinity of self, other, and cooperative community. For Imoaka Sensei, the individual cannot exist without the other as neighbor. And when you've got the other as neighbor and self, you trust in both of those, you've immediately got a cooperative community. So when you hear the language of individuality in Imoaka Sensei's thinking, it's always understood socially. Okay, you need to remember that. This is not one of those modern solipsistic spiritualities. Oh, it's my free religion, it's nobody else's. It's profoundly social simultaneously. He loved a particular interpretation of the parable of the prodigal son, where the son returns after spending all his inheritance. I'm sure many of you will know that story. In the Christian tradition, the parable of the prodigal son is often interpreted as seeing the father as the saving figure. This stands for God in a lot of Christian theology. And so it's the father who saves. But in Imoaka Sensei's interpretation of it, it's the home, the returning to home, returning to one. We're back at Kietsu. What saves both the father and the son is returning to one, to the home. So it's the social that saves. And I would also say that this is one of his great understandings of how the Buddha works. Amida Buddha, particularly, he draws on the Jodo Shinshu tradition here, that there's a profoundly social aspect to Buddha nature. It can't be done on its own. It's a social salvation. So I point to that. That's very important. A reminder for those who don't know Shin Buddhist tradition, Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, that Hozo Bosatsu, the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, is Amida Buddha it's called his causal stage. It's before Amida Buddha becomes a Buddha. Amida Buddha, or the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, is working in the world, always saving the world. It doesn't disappear off to the Pure Land or heaven. It's the understanding of the Buddha here as working in the whole community, working to enable salvation at a corporate and social level. Hence that saying, until all sentient beings are saved, I too cannot be saved. So that's really important. That becomes very important to Imoaka Sensei when he returns to Buddhism after an early conversion to Christianity, Anglican Christianity. Then he became a Congregationalist minister and then ended up in the Unitarian movement, and then this expanded to the free religious movement. So profoundly individual. It's salvation for me and me alone. It's profoundly social, but that immediately implies for Imoaka Sensei, but salvation requires everybody because we are everybody as well. So hold on to those. Okay, we'll move on to the second paragraph. If we apply the above principles to the position of the free religious person in a more concrete manner, then first and foremost, the church, or kyokai, I'm going to default to kyokai here. Yet this morning I was reading both. It's a bit too complicated. Remember, when you hear kyokai, you're hearing this mix of a place of religious study, devotion, practice, as well as this, how most of us would understand church. But I'll just use kyokai. So first and foremost, the kyokai of the free religious person must be a democratic one that equally respects both the individual and the collective. Back to that. That is to say, the kyokai must not belong to the clergy, such as Buddhist priests or Christian ministers, but rather it must belong to the entire congregation, the laity. In other words, the sovereignty of the church, the kyokai, must always remain in the shared hands of all members, and the clergy are simply executive functionaries. I believe that the same principle applies to the position of a religious founder. For example, Shinran Shonin said that Shinran has not a single disciple. Everyone is my fellow traveler and friend. I believe that this attitude is correct. If one does not establish one's own disciples or followers, and if comrades form genuine friendships, becoming of one heart and body, then the founder and the clergy can simply step into the background. It is even possible to imagine a situation where the church, kyokai, continues to function without the presence of a religious founder or clergy. Those religious founders and clergy who exert influence and provide guidance beyond their visible public activities are truly great religious figures. Consequently, within the kyokai, the mutual refinement among the members of the congregation is even more important than the sermons and the activities of the clergy. At the very least, there should be no hierarchical distinction between the value of the clergy's contributions and that of the congregation. So, back to the social. So, a free religious community in Imoaka Sensei's mind has to be democratic. There's no one person who's in charge. Absolutely central. So it equally respects the individual and the collective. When he uses the language of executive functionaries, That can sound very dismissive, but think about it in this way. In the free religious tradition, certainly the one I come from in the UK, I am the minister, and I might have the title Reverend. I never use it, by the way. It doesn't appear anywhere on our church literature, but I am the minister. I'm only the minister because the congregation vote me as the minister. I don't have any scare quote special authority, and it's always a combination of us together and the church deciding that at the moment anyway, I'm a reasonably good person to be the minister. It has to be this collective decision. So my authority, my any power, I don't really see it that way, is always gifted by the congregation democratically. It has to be that process. So that's very important in free religion. Shinran Shonin. Shinran Shonin is the key initial figure of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism. But Shinran Shonin always taught that he didn't have disciples, as you heard. So this again is beginning to push against the idea that free religion has founders. In Imoaka Sensei's mind, what this paragraph is beginning to point to is the idea that these key figures, Shinran Shonin, even the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, Hozo Bosatsu, but Jesus and Shakyamuni Buddha and any of the great religious leaders, they are not founders of religions. What they are in his mind are people who expressed free religion. They're free religionists. Free religion doesn't have a founder. Free religion has people who live it, express it. So you don't need a founder. And that's one of the reasons why he could continually say free religion in his context, in the Tokyo Kyetsu Kyokai, wasn't Christian, wasn't Christianity, wasn't Buddhism, wasn't Shintoism, because it wasn't an ism. It was an expression of free religion that could draw on the insights of these free religious teachers. Free religion is centered. Founders are pushed to, we don't need them, and the community itself is trying to express free religion. So a Kyokai can function without clergy, and it can function without any founders. And the last thing I'd like to pull out of this paragraph is that passage, that phrase, the mutual refinement among members of the congregation is more important than the sermons and activities of the clergy. This is all about mutual refinement. There may be people who know a lot about certain things, and one should always listen to people who know about a lot of things, but it's all about mutual refinement. It's not about, let's use this example, it's not about me passing on to you some eternal truth. It's about all of us exploring things with our various levels of expertise and knowledge to help us mutually refine each other. That's the free religious task. Okay, next section. It is often said that a defining character of the Kyokai, of the free religious person, is that it does not have prescribed articles. However, no matter how much a free religious person values freedom, it is impossible for them to have no intellectual expression whatsoever regarding their own faith. Rather, it is both natural and an expression of freedom that each person has their own articles of faith. Thus, almost paradoxically, a free religious person could be said to adhere to articles of faith even more than those in established religions. However, such articles of faith are personal and individual, and they are never a standard statement. Furthermore, it goes without saying that they are not something that can be imposed by an external religious authority. In other words, a free religious person absolutely cannot agree with the idea of believing in a creed, such as the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, or the Athanasian Creed, as if they were unchangeable eternal truths. that cannot have a single word added or removed. When it is said that a free religious person does not have articles of faith, it is meant in this sense, in the sense of having no statements that can't be changed, of having absolute statements. Articles of faith differ from person to person and evolve with time. They do not represent the whole truth, but merely express a part of it. However, even though they are only a partial expression of truth, since they are expressions of truth, a free religious person will feel a sympathetic resonance with other people's sincerely held articles of faith. Nevertheless, since a kyokai is an organized entity, it is naturally necessary to have some kind of charter that clarifies the basis of the congregation's unity. However, this is not really a creed, but rather a statement of shared purpose or a set of guiding practical principles. Okay. So let me pull out a couple of things from this. Free religion isn't about believing everything all at once and trying to express it fully yourself. No individual can do that. But a free religious person does have some things that they find central in their lives that really help them live. And the idea that Imoaka is trying to grasp here is that those articles of faith that a free religious person has are of the kind that the individual can take on board with a clean heart and full belief, so they can actually act. But even as one has those articles of faith, a free religious person never says, and that's it, they're final. The ones I have, it's done and dusted. You believe what I believe. So it's always provisional. I think that's part of the reason why in his statements of faith or principles of living, and I'm going to share that with you in a moment, he always put in brackets tentative or provisional or revised, to give an indication that even the most firmly held position at any given point is always tentative. It's always open to revision. So that, I think, is very important. Also notice that he's not saying a person can't hold to creeds like the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, or the Athanasian Creed. He's simply saying that a free religious person can't hold to them if those creeds are understood as being immutable and unchangeable. If a person has a way of understanding them in a non-absolutist way, and honestly, then that's fine. The problem is when someone holds them and says, and unless you believe like I believe, you're in trouble. So he's not pushing against these creeds as long as they are not fixed, firm, finished, final statements of faith that everybody has to agree. This is his ecumenical and interfaith understanding. Okay. And the last bit I'd like to pull out of this paragraph is this business about the necessary need to have some kind of charter, that clarifies the basis of the congregation's unity. He recognized that a local community, if it's to hold together in any coherent way, has to have some kind of statement that it's about. And here we turn to the principles of living, and I'll just read the headlines of these. I think most of you will have come across it. So I roll back up to the top. These are his principles of living, revised. There it is in brackets in 1973. I'm going to just read through these 8, but I'll pop along to the next one. You can see in 1981, he has another version of them where he calls it revised again, tentative. It really expresses this. Come on, this is a process. They started as these personal statements of faith, but Imoaka Sensei, in conversation with his congregation, started to say these principles of living before this, or at the beginning of the service. Notice they're not belief statements so much as statements indicating the shared attitude that a free religious person is bringing to this community, that then they apply to their own personal articles of faith and belief. So, one, I place trust in myself. Now, Michinori is here. Maybe it'd be lovely to have Michinori speak to this a little later on. This is this Shin'ichirō down here. It can be, and often is, translated as belief. Belief, of course, it's a complex and problematic term. It can also be translated as faith, but again, that has a particular quality. But a third interpretation, which is perfectly legitimate, is to talk about placing trust in. It's a much more dynamic way of translating that. So I think it's truer in English to translate Imaoka's use of Shin'ichirō as placing trust. So I place trust in myself. Okay. I place trust in my neighbor. And you'll see a neighbor is myself as neighbor. And then 3, I place trust in a cooperative community, because if you trust yourself and you trust your neighbor, that's already this mutual refinement, this cooperative community. By the way, the text in bold was the text that was said by the congregation on a Sunday morning. They didn't read the additional notes. Given those 3, you get to number 4. I place trust in this trinity of self, neighbor, and cooperative community. So please always remember that. I'll go back to the beginning. Returning to one is always about, Kietsu is always about trusting oneself. If you trust oneself, you trust one's neighbor. If you trust one's neighbor, you're beginning to work together. That's Kietsu. That's this returning to one. Number 5, in the 1970s, he added this one, trusting in the unity of life and nature, because he realized that the human cooperative community needed to be expanded to all things, self, neighbor, cooperative community, and merging with everything. There's this bigger cosmic cooperative community. That's how he described it later on. I place trust in the Kyokai. You have to have some kind of existent community, which explains why he further goes on to say, I place trust in a specific religion. It's all, you can, it's tempting to say, oh, I believe in universal religion. Well, universal, that's great, good. But if you don't practice it in an actual community, in a specific religious context, well, it's nothing. So he's always trying to keep this universal cosmic community in play while saying, but we need to express it here locally with its individual flavors. Imoaka Sensei's understanding of Kyokai is that it's going to look different in different places. It's going to look different in Transylvania. It's going to look different in Canada. It's going to look different in Italy. It's going to look different in the US. It's going to look different in the UK. And even within those communities, some communities are going to have a profoundly Christian flavor. Some are going to be more Buddhistic. Some are going to... That doesn't matter. What matters is, does the local community exist, and how it exists and what it does expresses free religion. That's the key thing. And then lastly, I place trust in free religion, Jiyu Shukyo, this dynamic, creative, inquiring, free and deliberative religion. I hope you can see that those aren't beliefs, propositional beliefs about the nature of the universe as such. The closest you're going to get to that is Imaoka saying, somehow we genuinely are all in this together. And that's a kind of metaphysical Unitarian assertion that somehow we're all returning to one, whatever this one is. Okay, so let's get back to the next paragraph. Here we are. That's it. Practical guiding principles. Next paragraph. The same can be said regarding ceremonies. A free religious person does not hold ceremonies in the sense that one must receive baptism to be saved, or that one must recite sutras to attain Buddhahood. However, religious conviction does not exist entirely naked in and of itself. It necessarily takes some concrete form. Thus, just as there is no heart or mind apart from material things, and just as there is no life apart from the body, so too there is no religion without ceremonies. However, since objects and forms are infinitely varied and never uniform, religious ceremonies are also infinitely diverse and appear to have nothing in common. In fact, differences in ceremonies have sometimes even caused schisms amongst religious denominations. We're all aware of that. Therefore, when free religious people gather in one place to hold a worship service, the question naturally arises, what kind of ceremonies should be adopted? At first glance, this seems like an extremely difficult problem. However, from the fundamental standpoint of free religious people, it can be resolved with the greatest of ease. I think Imoaka Sensei is overstating it there. It's not the greatest of ease. I think it can be done, but I think what he was really trying to say is that it's possible. So two things to pull out of this paragraph. Free religion has to do something, right? If free religious people meet together, simply talking about the ideas of religion, that's one thing it can do, but it needs to be more than that. It has to have some kind of devotional quality to it. So there has to be some kind of ceremonies. In Imoaka Sensei's own community, they were minimal. On a Sunday morning, there was something in the morning, I'm going to come back to that, but later on in the day, they met, they would sing a hymn. They started to sing a hymn, so had some music. There will be a talk, then there will be a time of discussion, conversation really, free inquiry. He hoped in later years that this would be followed by perhaps some more music and a time of, he uses the term silent prayer, and then it concludes with a time of socializing, conversation. So there's a bit of mutual refinement going on. So pretty minimal, but importantly, in the morning before the main service, they met for Seiza meditation, quiet sitting meditation. If you want to know more about that, please be in touch or go to my blog. There's lots of stuff there. It's just a very simple form of quiet sitting that he adopted very early on in the 1910s. And that period of Seiza meditation, lasting about an hour, was open enough that George tells us he attended that meeting once, that it was attended by a number of people who were not directly connected with the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai. So there was a Zen Buddhist priest who came, someone from Jodo Shinshu, and other people. So in Seiza meditation, people of very different religious traditions certainly could meet together, and they did meet together. And this was a very important example of what a free religious practice can look like. So it's important to remember this meditative quality of Imaoka's life, and I think I would argue, the central practice of Imaoka's free religion is Seiza meditation, along with thinking, talking, and conversing. Those are the twin poles around which Kietsu Kyokai operates. Okay, next passage. The religion of the free religious person is a universal religion, a faith that should be applicable to all people under heaven. Therefore, it should be impossible for a particular group of people to find it inaccessible because of ceremonial differences. If such a situation were to arise, then that free religion would no longer be a universal religion. If it truly possesses universal life, should it not naturally hold enough power of attraction to move even those accustomed to different ceremonies, allowing them to transcend ceremonial differences and feel a sense of shared spiritual resonance. Is it not precisely the ability to transcend differences in ceremonies and differences in doctrine in the place where mutual sympathy and resonance occur that we find the sacred poignancy and true aim of the communion of saints, he uses that Christian term, or the gathering of the sacred multitudes? So this is a term drawn from, at least in my reading, again, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, from Shinto, which represents the ideal and profound meaning of a kyokai of free religionists. Thus, the ceremonies used in the worship services of a free religious person's kyokai need not be fixed or specific. The most essential thing is not the question of ceremonies, but rather the pulsation, vital movement of the universal great life, powerful enough to move and inspire even those accustomed to different ceremonies. However, if someone were to insist that in order to make this universal great life pulsate, it must be done through a particular ceremony, that no alternative ceremony can suffice, then I would begin to doubt whether their religion is truly universal. So, the thing I'd like to pull out of this paragraph particularly is his reference here at the end to great life. Now, actually, I'm going to ask Michinori, can you tell me how to pronounce great life? It's something like Dai Saimai. Let me find the footnotes. Can you tell me how it's pronounced? There it is. There's the footnote.
Dai Seimei.
Dai Seimei.
Seimei, yes.
Thank you very much. I wanted to know. Dai Seimei. This is a really important term. It becomes very important in Japan during the Meiji and Taisho periods, when this idea of life and physis becomes key through this European Lebensphilosophy, life philosophy, of people like Bergson and Dilthey. Now, Bergson is really important to Imoaka Sensei, this creative life, élan vital. So it becomes very important because of that. But it also becomes a very important term in the 1920s and 40s through New Buddhism, liberal Shinto, and free religion. So in Itoen, founded by Nishida Tenko-san, who was a big influence on Imoaka Sensei, he used the term. And again, within Rishiko Kai, I hope I've got this right, there are various examples of talking about the Buddha as great life. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, that's good. So you see this term great life becoming very, very important for Imoaka Sensei. This one great life, returning to one great. The great life is there all the time. Ceremonies don't make it pulsate and operate. Beliefs and doctrines don't make it pulsate and operate. Great life, great nature is always pulsating. And that's what Imoaka Sensei is trying to point to at this point. So great life becomes a very important term. And I think it's a pivotal term that helps him understand how Bergson's élan vital, this creative life of sort of creative evolution, selfless evolution, can be conjoined with the ideas he's drawing on from Buddhism and Shinto. It's a term that can bring them together successfully. Okay, last paragraph, and then I'll stop. Well, penultimate paragraph, but I'll still stop. Finally, clarifying the differences and similarities between a kyokai of free religionists and a religious association will also help explain the characteristics of a free religion, From my perspective, both groups share the principle of advocating for friendly relations among religions. However, whereas the religious association is a collaboration concerned with the secondary aspects of religions, of different religions, a kyokai of free religionists seeks unity, kiitsu, in the essence of religions, the great life that manifests itself everywhere all the time in all things. Consequently, while it is difficult for the Free Religious Association to conduct worship, a kyokai of free religionists can, or rather must, conduct worship, have some kind of religious and spiritual practice, ceremonies. A kyokai of free religionists must do this. This is the key point of difference between the two. Whereas the religious association functions simply as a coordinating body, a kyokai of free religionists is a firmly autonomous and independent kyokai. If that is the case, then what is the relationship between established churches and a kyokai of free religionists? Does one have to leave one's established kyokai in order to become a member of a kyokai of free religionists? Or is it possible to belong to both kyokai at the same time? In other words, is a kyokai of free religionists a denomination, or does it move beyond denominational boundaries? To this question, I would like to answer both yes and no. If an established kyokai is not exclusive, and through the denomination as a symbolic form, it embraces a universal religious life, then that kyokai is in itself already a kyokai of free religionists. In such a case, one is free to belong to either kyokai, or if one has the capacity, to belong to both at the same time. However, in most cases, established kyokai exist as denominations in an exclusive sense. Thus, there is a great need at this moment to found a new kyokai of free religionists that goes beyond established kyokai. Moreover, it is both natural and necessary that once the connection with established kyokai is severed, one should dedicate oneself entirely to the cultivation of a kyokai of free religionists. Therefore, no matter how supra-denominational its intent may be, once the kyokai of free religionists is formed, it will, in a strict sense, cease to be supra-denominational and will become a new denomination. However, rather than regressing into an exclusive and self-assertive denomination, it will become a denomination that constantly evolves in accordance with the times, striving above all for the expansion of the universal religious life. In other words, it will become a supra-denominational denomination. Now, a couple of things to pull out from that, and then I will stop. I think what he's trying to do here is pull out something he noticed in his own life. Some of you will know, he was a long-term member of the International Association for Religious Freedom, which is a religious association. Pre-war, he also belonged to another Kiitsu Kyokai, which in English is always translated as the Association Concordia. Both those groups function as an association of trying to draw together people talking about religion, trying to understand how it works, learn from each other, and so on and so forth. But it's not in and of itself a specifically religious organization. It's more secular. It's an association. Imoaka Sensei valued that kind of organization and association, no doubt about it, massively necessary. But it became increasingly important for him to say, yes, but if we're free religionists, how will we have a church of free religionists, a kyokai of free religionists? And this is really what he's trying to do with the Tokyo Kiitsu Kyokai and with free religion. And it's an interesting thing to point out here that Imoaka Sensei's involvement with the IARF always had that tension. He wanted to change the name of the IARF, the association, the International Association for Religious Freedom, into the International Association of Free Religions. Now, given what I've said, and in the Japanese, it always said the International Association of Free Religions. That's what it says in the Japanese. Most people in the West didn't realize that he translated the International Association for Religious Freedom in this way. But it's a question for us today, because here we are meeting. We're both, all of us, involved in the IARF, but the Free Religion Institute is an attempt to try and figure out how to be free religionists together. And that's really what he's talking about. How do you create an international association of free religionists? Right? I would argue that that's kind of what we're doing here, but don't let anybody know the revolution's underway. Leave you to decide whether that's true. And the second thing to draw out of this is it is possible to have multiple belongings. I think pretty much everyone here in this room has that. My formal affiliation with an established religion is with Higashi Honganji Otaniha Jodo Shinshu, and I'm a Unitarian minister coming from a Christian tradition, and I'll leave you to speak for yourself. If the body you belong to, the more established body, you can belong to it because it's expressive of a free religion, great, you can do it, no problem. You can also belong to a kyokai of free religionists. Imoaka Sensei's basic point is that's fine, but if you can't do that, because most established religions don't allow you to do that, they'll throw you out as a heretic, then really you have no choice but to try and start a free religious kyokai. So you can belong to two. He borrowed from the English two terms, ready-made and made to order. If the ready-made suit, the ready-made established religion fits you and is fine, that's fine. But if it doesn't, because some of us have got strange religious shapes, if you can't wear the ready-made religion, then you have to try and create this kind of made to order free religion. So it depends. Great phrase, it depends. You can belong to an established religion if it's expressive of free religion. If you can't, then really you've got to do it. But you end up having to create something. So it becomes this idea of a free religious, if you create a free religious kyokai, it has to always be open and transcending denominational boundaries. Right, I'm going to stop at that point and simply point to that there is an extra paragraph, a wonderful story by Lessing that he used all the time from Nathan the Wise. So I would encourage you to read that. And I'll simply finish with his last sentence. And that's it. And then I'm stopping. Over to you. The quintessence of religion is something far greater and more precious than Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Shinto, doctrines, ceremonies, or denominations. It is a universal life, great life, which we may provisionally call love. Thus, the free religious person dedicates themselves solely to the free unfolding of this universal life. Nothing more, nothing less. Over to you. So an early piece that then gets developed over the next, 50, 60, 70, 80, 35, 40 years. Right, there must be some questions. I hope there are, or thoughts. Yeah, go for it. Stephen, please unmute yourself. Oh, no, you're muted, Stephen. Sorry. Yep.
I hardly know where to begin. There is so much in this that uh, I could envision free religionists being, if you can envision it, the way the rabbis study over the Torah and for years and years and years, then they read the same paragraphs over and over again, and come up with different interpretations. I think this essay is fantastic. I read it first. I was overwhelmed. I must say that one of our members who attended earlier, the earlier session, wrote me an email that can only be described as being in ecstasy over the session that you had earlier. I won't describe who it is.
Could it be John?
No, it precisely would not have been John.
Oh,
And so my question is, um, if there were not farmers, there could not be a farmer's market where you could select different things. If there were not different established religions, could you have free religion? Namely, are they interdependent? Namely, that the ideas and concepts of different sorts come from different sources, and the free religion concept, to a certain extent, at least for my interpretation, excuse me, is dependent in part on having these different ideas being fed into the mix that is free religion. So that's one thought that comes to mind. Can free religion exist if there are not the substratum of other religions?
If I may make a suggestion, it's the wrong way round to put it. It's because free religion exists that established religions occur. All established religions are the fruit of free religion. So his argument, this is why there are no founders, that Jesus was a free religionist and could engage in the world in the way he did, bringing out insights that then eventually became an established religion. Shakyamuni Buddha the same, and so on and so forth. So the established religions in Imoaka's mind, and indeed in mine, are because free religion exists. The task, and he explicitly says this in another essay, the primary task of a free religionist is not precisely to start a kyokai of free religionists, although sometimes we have to do that because, well, we all know why we have to do that. The primary task of a free religionist is to engage with the established religions to help them see the free religious foundations of their own traditions, and to say, look, you've ossified it, you've made it stationary, you've made it static. Go back to the inspiring source that created it. This is one of the reasons why Imoaka Sensei couldn't maintain the traditional role as a pastor, as a Christian pastor, because his job was to convert people to Christianity. Whereas he began to see, oh no, Buddhism and Shinto, look, they're expressing free religion. Why would I want to convert them? My job is to make Buddhists free Buddhists, and Shintoists free Buddhists, and Christians free Christians, and so on and so forth. Atheists as well, free atheism. So I want to say that, and I'll stop at that point, but I do want to speak to your lovely word ecstasy. I'm glad someone found my presentation. But I love the etymology of ecstasy. Ex stasis, ekstasis, outstanding. It's about coming out of yourself. Ecstasy is precisely what you're talking. Ecstasy is a really good word. It doesn't mean, it means sort of stepping out into the world, out of these confined moments, into this great stream of life, this great life. Sai mai. Oh, no, I've got it right anyway. My pronunciation of Japanese is terrible. I promised to get it. But that's is precisely what free religion is about, to reconnect people with that living great life in that ecstatic way. You cease to be inward and you burst out. So I hope that's some kind of answer. But again, please, Wayne, any answer that I would give in the spirit of free religion mustn't be understood as a capital A answer. That, right, that's it, it's done and dusted. It's always the beginning of the next conversation, the next. Yeah, sorry, Wayne.
It seems to me that a significant part of talking of free religion is really talking about the criticality of community.
Yes.
We seek to have some kind of connection with other people, and we try to find some basis for having that kind of connection. And if we're allowed the freedom, then we can function in a variety of different ways, but still be connected. But it seems like people decide that, oh, we want to bring structure to this. We want to bring clarity to this. We want to, so suddenly, people who are just seeking community, who are just seeking contact with other human beings, find themselves struggling with the structure that other people are trying to put upon them.
Yeah.
So, like when I think about the beginning of what you're talking about around the critical importance of the fellowships, as opposed to necessarily a ministerial church. We're going through that right now, and it's very interesting. I mean, part of it is that different people have different ideas about how the place should be. But there's also a lot more, we started having coffee before when people arrive. You're having coffee after, and there's starting to be that sense of, and having some kind of food after many services, and just a sense of trying to build community outside of just somebody who happens to be up at the front speaking for some period of time.
Yeah. No, that's again very helpful. I think the closest thing you're going to get to a conventional belief, capital B belief, in Imoaka Sensei's thinking is a profound belief that this intraconnectivity as well, exists. Whether we like it or not, we're all connected, right? End of story. So it's really, that's fundamental. So the task then is to find ways to reveal this truth. Yeah. So it's there, he says. The hard work of free religion is to make it living, and that absolutely. But I'd also want to point out, Imoaka Sensei was very happy with difference and tension and differences, because he seems to have had a sense that, now this is me talking. Well, sorry, no. I think I'm accurately interpreting Imoaka Sensei's ideas. I think I am. You've got, oh, sorry, here in the chat, I'll share two links so you can go to the essays. So up in the chat, there are two links I've just put there. You can look at loads of his other essays. He understood that you needed to contend, and there should be tension and friction where we needed to have tension and friction. I mean, some things can be said that need to be challenged with each other. So it's not that everything is smooth and lovely, What we're looking for is a genuine community where differences can be addressed at a meaningfully deep level. So in my own teaching in Jewish, Christian, and Muslim relations, I would constantly say to my students, the primary task here is not to learn to agree better, because we're going to disagree about a lot of stuff. Just we're going to disagree. The task is to disagree better. Always disagree better. So it is a process of engagement in community. So it's mutual refinement. There is a problem.
But Andrew, I think that, one of the basic issues in that is trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, we have to have a feeling that we have this inside part of us and we want to be connected, but ultimately we need to feel that we can trust our neighbor, that we can trust these other people, that
Yeah.
they're not doing things that are going to hurt us
Yeah.
in that process, I think.
And this is why I think it starts local, placing trust in the kyokai and the specific. You don't try and you don't leap to. We know that the world isn't operating that way, but at least we have a chance of creating a small
Yes.
kyokai where trust can be shown, and then that becomes a model. You're basically offering people a model of how you can do that. That's the witness, if you like. So yeah, your point is
Mhm.
massively well
Yeah.
made. But I do want, Imoaka Sensei wouldn't have put it this way, but this is really helpful. In the modern world, and the modern world has been partly created by a religious world that loves propositional, yeah, I believe this, this, and this, and if you believe this, this, and this, then we're the same. This is exactly what happens in the modern world. The modern world wants seamless flow of information, yeah? That we're like this, that we fit together like this. Now, the problem with seamless flow of information, and creeds are one of these. Do you believe in the creed? I believe in the creed. Oh, I believe in the creed. Boom. Seamless connectivity. Seamless connectivity like that is profoundly dangerous because it doesn't leave any time to stop and think. It's whoosh. Yeah, it just jumps from one to the other. People seem to value this very well. In certain contexts, it's really important. In a computer system flying a plane, you want seamless connectivity between your joystick and the flaps. You don't want any tension, or the information flow has got to go whoosh. Yeah. Connectivity like that is massively vital and important in certain contexts. But in the world of religion and spirituality and human relationships, you don't want that. You really want to imagine that when we meet, it's not like this. It's more like a square object meeting a round object. In order for those two to connect, they've got to explore each other slowly. Do you see what I mean? It's not like, oh, you believe the creed, I believe the creed, everything's fine. It's, no, hang on, really? That's interesting. Well, why do you, and so on. And then it slows the process down. So I think free religion is an interesting example of slow. This is a technical way of putting it outside Imaoka's language, of slowing down information. Of stopping our encounters being mere sharing of information, and making our encounters about learning wisdom and mutual refinement. And that takes time. You have to slow it down. And coffee and hanging out and having a conversation and then coming back next week and revisiting it. It's all about slowing down information flow so we can become better human beings. But that's my way of putting it. Anyone else? Michi, Judith, George, Norby, I think. Was that right? Yes, and Stephen. Oh, Stephen, yes, you've. Any other thoughts? Yes, Stephen? You're muted again, yeah.
Yeah, I hate speaking too much, but there's so much in this, Andrew, that I'm sure we could spend multi weeks discussing this single essay. There's one thing that I see as a problem, not within the essay, but that it sort of points out, and that is in order to have the community and the kyokai function, there has to be some congregational charter, basic ground rules. And what I see has happened is when you try to establish those basic ground rules in terms of, call it a driver's license, a hunting license, and so on. I like that analogy, but they go too far and they start to prescribe behaviors and beliefs that essentially limit the ability of exchange and diverse ideas to appear. And Imoaka Sensei's principles, his ideas do not do that. But I've never seen a congregation, and of course I come from a very liberal tradition of Unitarians. They start to constrict the religious freedom of the congregation. They don't know where to stop.
Yeah.
And I just wondered what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I suppose there's two things to say there. One is to remind everybody that liberal religion is not the same as free religion. It's very easy for liberal religions to start out as free religions, then become liberal religions. And by that, I mean that they absolutely decide what their religion is. It becomes an ism. It's one of the reasons I don't engage with Unitarianism. Interested in any ism, I mean, of any kinds, but I come from the Unitarian tradition as well. So it becomes an ism, and so the Unitarianism is often liberal in that it does take a position that other religions have a place in the world, which is good. We need that. That's great. But they themselves cease to be a free religion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing to notice. A liberal religion is not necessarily a free religion, and therefore, by definition, and Imoaka Sensei struggled with this all the time, how do you keep a liberal religion a free religion? It's one of the ways, and this is a bit disturbing for all of us who do have churches and communities, is to remember that Imoaka Sensei's own community didn't last his own life. A couple of years after he died, the Kiitsu Kyokai in Tokyo was gone. But George and I had a long conversation about this, and I think George has landed on something really important, is that free religion always needs to be ad hoc for the moment. And so he never put in place. Now, when I came to it, I read it as a sort of weakness. And I think there is a weakness here because one wants to sustain community over the long term. But I saw it as a real weakness that Imoaka Sensei had not put in place structures to keep the Tokyo Kiitsu Kyokai going. But there is something about his way of doing things that allowed his own community, no matter how much he loved it and worked for it, to dissolve itself. Its time had passed. It needed a new ad hoc structure. And it's finding that balance between, so I'm a minister, and the church that I'm the minister of in Cambridge was founded in 1904, got its buildings in 1923 and 1927, and did exactly what you're talking about, Stephen. It became a capital L, capital C Christian church, and nothing could change. Nothing could change, no matter what I tried to do or what others in this tried to do. It had got this juggernaut, movement about it. What changed? What enabled us to change as a community? The pandemic. The pandemic shattered all those things. We couldn't meet in the same way. The old service didn't work online. We had to revisit it. That's why we brought our evening service, which was one of mindful meditation, and with my interest in free religion and Buddhism and Shinto and so on and so forth. And so it was only the catastrophic hitting of the pandemic which shattered those internal structures that enabled us to change. And that's been a real lesson to me, because I tried, not that I'm right and everybody else was wrong, but I felt the church had become a liberal religion, not a free religion. It wasn't me that affected it, it was the great life that did it. Yeah. Just ran through those structures, shattered them, and when we came out the other side, we had a different way of being together, a different way of talking about things. So, Stephen, I would ask us to think about the real value of ad hoc, and that these institutions, these kyokai, maybe they're designed at their best as free religious communities to have their moment and then dissolve and then start again. Then the question for us, and then I'll stop there because we're at that point, I'll let George finish, is how do we pass on that tradition? Oh, Mitchie Nori's just gone. I saw his hand go up. Oh, yeah, there it is. Sorry, you've moved to the top. You moved on my screen. Is how you pass on the tradition. So new free religious communities are made here, now here, now here, now here.
Yes.
Mitchie.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. The Imoaka sensei's lecture and your talk always give me a crucial hint for my investigation what a free religion is. Now, I have an image of a free religionist. That image is a laughing Buddha. Have you seen the laughing Buddha? A small image.
I have one on my, yes.
In a statue. Now, normally we imagine the Buddha is a kind of ascetic figure, but that image of laughing Buddha is also presenting the state of enlightenment, because in enlightenment, there's no boundary, there's no demarcation and division at all. So I think that's the freedom. Now, I think that if I am a really free religious person, maybe I can enjoy playfulness. Have you heard of there are lots of meditations, lots of samadhi. Samadhi is a one-minded state of Buddhist practice. We call it samadhi. The samadhi, there are lots kind of samadhis. Samadhi of emptiness, samadhi of the bodhisattva canon, regard bodhisattva, all kinds of. Now, one of those many samadhis that's called samadhi of playfulness. I think that's a wonderful word. So, free religious person may be, I think, always playful, because they feel they don't see any boundary in the religious world. So that's my image of free religion. Thank you.
It's a wonderful one, and I know we're coming to wrap up, but if I may be forgiven for just sharing this quickly, because this text was an influence on Imoaka Shin'ichirō. This is from the 5 prayers of Itoen. And if you'll notice, this is by Tenko Nishida-san. Very interesting to note this. Look at this. Sorry, I'll get to the top. Komyo Kigan, or prayer for light, provisional. There's provisional again, just as Imoaka Sensei uses it. So, oh, that's interesting, I discovered. Then notice this, the second one, the second of the 5 prayers. May we revere the heart of all religions and participate in the great vow of Kietsu. Kietsu no Taigan. So Kietsu appears in this prayer, this early prayer, but the bit about Michi, thank you so much for pulling this out. I hadn't fully appreciated this, but look, 5 here. And in this way, may we return to our home. This is the 5th prayer. And in Itoen's language, it's this fragrant cave of heavenly flowers. Always rambling leisurely, shoyo. It's like sauntering and in the formless paradise of light. But look at this, here it is. If one attains a broad perspective, indeed this world is a pure land of serene light, a celestial garden of wonderful joy, where the rise of civilization and the phenomena of evolution, even the pure rules and precepts, are merely a freely playing samadhi. Yeah. This freely playing of samadhi, I think, is in Imoaka Sensei's philosophy. And I'll stop with George because George can maybe finish. It seems that Imoaka Sensei himself was a kind of laughing Buddha. He would chuckle and laugh at a lot of things. So thank you, Michi. That's wonderful. George.
Oh, that was a great, perfect ending, Michinori. Perfect ending. And thank you so much, Andrew. You have sent me back to looking at a couple of terms, and I'll bring those up next week. From this morning, I got 7 little things to address as I look into Imaoka's challenges, the pitfalls of liberal religion and rational religion as we look at that next week. So hopefully you have plenty to think about for a week. Oh, geez, I will just restrain comments until next week. And it was a wonderful time for me listening to some of the things that have come out in these new translations and thrown me back to wanting to look at a couple of terms from the perspectives that Imaoka had. One of the perspectives is Confucianism. And I saw 2 terms that had very, very helpful Confucian notions behind them that might have helped us with some of the questions. One of them is institutionalization. And Andrew, I loved your comment about the ad hoc community that is liberative. So we'll address these things next week. Andrew, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. It is such a privilege because you are the shakers right now for communities, and things are beginning to take fire. So see you hopefully in a week, and we'll continue. Good night, all. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.